I will be teaching you how to draw one of the four elements, fire. So stay with me as we learn how to draw fire. Hi, my name is Brian and this is Learning to Draw from the Very Start. This video series is designed to teach the beginner that wants to learn how to draw but couldn't find that right teacher, book, or video. This series will teach you step by step the easiest way possible to draw. So get your pencil and paper ready and let's get drawing. Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today I will be showing you guys how to draw fire. And this is a short series on drawing elements. I mean, what good is learning to draw one or two things if you can't put them together? So today we will be drawing fire. So the first thing you need to know about drawing fire is the shapes that fire takes. So if you can draw a half moon, reverse half moon, and S, like so, open S, and a reverse S, like so. Those are what I would call your basic three shapes, and maybe you'll hit a triangle every now and then. Those are your basic four shapes of drawing fire. Four shapes, 2, 3 shapes of drawing fire. So the second thing you want to know is fire usually runs at a triangle, meaning the top of the fire is always going to be the center of the fire is always going to be higher than your edges of the fire. So whenever you draw a fire shape, always keep a triangle in mind. So with that said, let's do this. Let's say you have a log on fire. Draw a quick log. And the top is on fire. So you want to start out with your shapes. I'll try to go slow, but I'm so used to it that I'll end up going fast, but I'll try to go slow. So you want to have your curve shapes. You curve in and out, up and down, and as I say, into that triangle form. And you notice you have your half moons here, your half moons there, you have your S right in here. So it's just basically throwing these forms together to make a fire. And the fire is highest in the middle. It burns hottest in the middle. So it's always going to go into that triangle shape. So on the log now, you can draw inside fire a little bit on the inside, but you don't want to take away from the main part. So if this log was on fire, the straight line here, let me bring some out. The straight line here would get erased. Parts of it would get erased to actually make it look like the fire is, consuming the top of the log. So I would break it up like that to give it that look like it is on fire. And you don't have to put the fire right there in the middle, but I would. And maybe a little bit on the side, depending on how hot the fire is, how big the fire is. And notice I always turn my paper, and I say always turn your paper. It just makes it easier to pull the pencil than push the pencil. So if you have that, you would usually have smoke. And check out my video on drawing smoke, and I'll just draw a little bit of smoke. Well, I'll put it down here. I don't want to crowd that. So if my log was on fire, like so, then usually smoke. And smoke is just a bunch of, I wouldn't say ovals so much, just circles on edge and to trail up, like so. And then you would do some shading, because white smoke especially, you'd have that shading. Even in black smoke, you'd have a little bit of shading somewhere. But this is not a smoke tutorial, but you can check out my smoke tutorial, like so. Pause. 3, 2, 1, start. So if I had, let's say the ground was on fire. Here's the ground, and then there's just a fire that ran across the ground. And this is not going to be a center fire like this. This is just going to be a smooth fire that's going across the ground. And remember your three shapes. You can have some taller than the others, but And because I've done this so much, you want to go with the flow. I don't go slow and try to say, well, this is a fire, because it looks too slowly drawn, if you understand what I'm saying. You don't want it to look, you want it to look more natural. Fire is not going to just come up with a perfect shape like this every time. So I make mine small and just go with the flow. As long as it usually comes to a point, other like water would be round, like so. And then I'll do a video on drawing water too. So this is your ground here. This is your fire that runs across it. Say like it's a small forest fire. Same thing on the log. I will erase a lot of the bottom. You don't want it. You don't want it too. You want to make it stagnant. You don't want to make it too uniform, like so. And then I will put the fire at the bottom, a lot of times in an opening. Nothing too big. I don't want it to look like there's another fire in front of it. I just want it to look like the fire is kind of rising from the bottom, like so. And then, depending on what type of fire it is, I'll put a little bit in the middle. But you don't want to overdo. You don't want to continue to just add more and more and more fire, because it takes away from your main fire source. For instance, if I put fire behind it, and I usually don't put fire behind fire unless I can not get away from it, but unless it kind of is called for. But if I put a fire behind here, it starts to take away from the fire itself. You can get away with it, but if you put too much, if I put another layer of fire back here, or row of fire, it kind of gets out of hand, and you lose the fact that your first layer of fire, your first row of fire is what counted, what counts. So if this was like grass, just open it up like that. You don't have to put the little grass stems, but I will put just a little bit of fire around the opening. But to do that, have 3 rows, you take away, and you have to do some kind of shading. But can you really shade fire, since it's actually a light source? So I usually won't do that. I'll usually do the first layer, the first row of fire, and maybe some grass burning behind it. Let's just say this log here. This log was on fire, and I might put a little bit of extra fire coming off of it. Some actual timbers that are burning and are coming off of it, just to give it that raging, burning feel to it. All right, let's grab another piece of paper. And let's say that somebody had a flamethrower. Some guy had a flamethrower. I know some people are probably tripping about, oh, he keeps turning the paper, but this is just me. I cannot draw straight. This is just me. Let's just say, here's your nozzle to your flamethrower. Give it a couple openings. And if it shot out fire, the first thing I would do, I wouldn't just have fire come out like that. That's a little bit too boring, and that shows a lack of power from the flamethrower. I would have the fire, when it first bursts out, I would have it come up like so, and then my fire would come out. I'm turning my paper up so it's easier to draw the fire. And you don't want to get it round. I'm rushing, so you want to keep it crisp and sharp, like fire. And then on the inside, I would give it maybe a little more energy, shall you say, because the fire burns hotter in the center, like so. Now, as I said, I'd give it that little energy coming out. And if these were holes in the side of the gun, in the side of the barrel, I may do something like that. But just as long as you don't, and I was getting round here, you don't want to do something, you don't want to make fire around. Now, if I did like a rocket, let's say a rocket. I'll do a cheesy little rocket here. And I'm trying to keep my paper in focus. And this rocket was shooting by. And keeping it more pointed using your half moons and your S. It'll be more like that. And the difference is the fire here would not be as strong as here coming out of the rocket because I have the points pointing forward. And that gives an indication that the fire is going forward, whereas this one is coming back. And because it's more stronger, then the fire would be coming back. It would be moving at a higher rate of speed, so it would be coming back. Now, if another indication of fire being strong is the waves. Let's just say the waves. So if I drew fire, a stream of fire, like so, and I drew another one, this one would look like it has more energy because the waves are further apart than this one. And I just drew that middle part from the beginning. So if you want a higher blast, then you would just move your tips further away than you would for a regular slower blast of fire, like so. Pause. And 3, 2, 1. All right, let's get another piece and we'll do something else. Now, usually fire is fueled by air, but usually the wind is what keeps it going. So if you're doing a fire, most fires, unless it's just sitting, it will actually take direction because of the wind blowing. Like so. So you always want to know what direction your wind is blowing, and then you have your smoke if you need your smoke. But, I usually won't put a fire behind the fire, but I will put a little bit within the fire. Because the center always burns hotter, and that would be the center, the lower it is. And as I say, if I draw it burning something, I will leave those spaces in between. And another thing is, as I said, you might have some, fire embers that's coming from it. I wouldn't put too much to take away. And even on the inside of your fire, you might have, let's just say, something burning, something burning from the inside. And if you do this, you want to keep the shape away from looking like a fire. Make it square or make it round and give it some lines, like burning lines, to make it look like it is burning. And you can actually have something down inside with broken lines to indicate there is something on fire inside or behind the fire. But you don't want your shapes to look like the fire. You don't want it pointy. And you understand, once it burns up, it's going to put some through there. It's going to start losing its edges, so you don't want a square per se. Another thing is to give fire a stronger look is to, and I'm looking for my pen, to give it some line weight. And line weight is just making the line thicker in areas and thinner in other areas. Usually, let me ink this whole thing before I get started with the line weight. And when you're inking it, try not to follow each line per se. You know, go with the feel. I mean, if you feel like you want to do another half moon or S shape somewhere in between, you know, go for that. But the faster you do it, the smoother it becomes. It looks more like fire when you go faster than when you go slower. And we're just doing the inside or the outside. Now, as I said, give it line weight. Usually where it curves, you make it thinner. Curves out, you make it thinner, thicker. To make it look like it's burning hotter. You don't have to do this, you know, especially if you're not inking, but this is just a tip to actually help. Make your fire look like fire. And on some points, but usually you don't have to. But it just gives it a different look, or better look, or stronger look if you're inking. Now, just for the fun of it, as I say, you have your embers burning. This is the small pin. And that could be a piece of whatever's burning, like so. So now let's just say, just because just say we have this guy and he's on fire, poor guy, and he's running, and you know you can't run away from fire no matter how hard you try, because the air just fuels it. So we got this guy here, he's on fire. Make this guy a little better. So, and as I said, when you run on the trail, you're going to have a trail of fire, and this guy's really on fire because it's a thicker, wider curve. Sorry, my mind just went away somewhere. And I have a little bit here, maybe a little bit off his legs, and from the knee. And as I said, I will break this line up here. Call it the baseline, but the line where the fire hits, I'll break that up there, and maybe put a little bit more on this guy's back, coming out, come there, and then because he's running, I would trail some fire to give it that more, that feel of him running. So this guy, you know, he's like screaming, he's like not happy because he is on fire. And if I ink that, as I said, I would give it that line weight to it. And I should have used the thinner pen in the beginning. And because the fire is coming so much off of him, it looks a little more thicker as it's more fire. Like say this guy was dousing gasoline. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So yeah, you have the fire, so I would just bring some of the curves, make it a little thicker, line weight. Could be charred, and that's just using some strokes just like that. charred look, like so. So, you know, and I don't really want to draw this whole thing out, but I will. And as I stated if you've seen the drawing the stick figure, you know, you'd have clothes on, so the shape of the body really doesn't really matter because you cover it up with clothes. If I put pants on this guy, you know, his pants would be on fire too. And then you don't have to really worry so much about, you know, oh, is that leg right or is that arm right? So, you know, I'd put clothes on him, a shirt, but the shirt would be on fire, like so. So, and just for charred look, let's just say that same log that we burnt, I don't know how that's going to come out earlier. Let's say the top of it, if it burnt out, the top of it would not be smooth like that. It would be burnt down like that. Let's say this part is burnt down as well. Then say it didn't affect the bottom, so you still have your bark at the bottom, but on the top it did affect it. And I said you just get that you can actually cross hatch if you want to give it that burnt look instead of just doing the whole thing black. Let me do it with a pen. Maybe it'll come out a little better. Pen not writing. Marker. It's time to get a new one. It is. And just bring it down in circles to indicate that log is round. And then I'll go to a fatter one. And that just shows that the log was burnt up because it's not flat anymore, except at the bottom. And you can actually draw an inline where the fire actually stopped burning it, right there. And then usually if I did something like that, I may have just, you know, a little bit of fire left, and then your smoke. Since it's out, I wouldn't put one plume of smoke, maybe two, maybe a third one, to show that it's not so hot that it's making a lot of smoke. And then shade it. As I say, check out my smoke tutorial. Like so. So there you have it with fire. Just remember, fire is going to be in a triangle shape. The highest part is usually the hottest part. Keep your S's and your half moons. Don't try to be so perfect with it, and then you'll be able to do fire. Alright, thank you for watching, and look out for my next video. And if you're liking some of this stuff, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Alright, thank you.